When it comes to Majuro, the capital city of the Marshall Islands, there is a noticeable difference between rural and urban areas. In urban areas like the city center and neighborhoods, such as Delap and Wojja, you'll find a more developed and bustling environment with a range of facility and services like shops, restaurants, markets, and hospitals. On the other hand, rural areas in Majuro offer a quieter and more natural setting. These areas are characterized by lush greenery, scenic landscapes, and a slower pace of life. You might come across traditional villages and get a glimpse of local culture, like places such as Lora and Wojja. When it comes to the presence of microplastics, it can vary in urban and rural areas due to different factors, which is important to note that microplastics have become a global issue and their presence is not limited to specific areas. They can be found in various environments worldwide, including both urban and rural settings. In urban areas, where there is typically higher population density and more human activity, the generation and accumulation of plastic waste tend to be greater. This can result in higher concentration of microplastics in urban environments including soil, water bodies, and even the air. In rural areas, while there may be less human activity and population density, microplastic can still be present. While urban areas may have more sources of plastic pollution, rural areas can still be impacted by microplastics through the transport of these particles by wind and water currents. Additionally, rural areas may have their own sources of plastic pollution. For example, improper waste management practices in rural areas can lead to the accumulation of plastic waste and the subsequent generation of microplastic. Plastic can break down into microplastics through a process called fragmentation. So, this occurs when larger plastic items, such as bottles or bags, are exposed to environmental factors like sunlight, heat, and physical stress. Over time, these factors can cause the plastic to degrade and become brittle, leading to the formation of cracks and breakage. It's also important to note that the process of plastic breakdown into microplastic is influenced by other ranges of factors, including the type of plastic it is, environmental conditions, and the presence of other agents like microorganisms. It is important to study the distribution of microplastics in soil and to compare between urban and rural areas in Majuro for many reasons. Understanding the distribution patterns of microplastic can help us identify the sources and pathways of plastic pollution in both urban and rural environments. By comparing the levels and types of plastics in these areas, we can gain insight into different sources of plastic waste. By comparing the distribution of microplastics between urban and rural areas, we can assess the extent of contamination between both of these areas. It's important to understand the extent of microplastic pollution and have an insight of where microplastics are more likely to occur. The study or site locations were situated in Lora, Wojja, Wojja, and Delap, and these locations had been carefully selected for the purpose of the research to examine the distribution of microplastic presence in both urban areas like Delap and Wojja, and rural areas like Lora and Wojja. Here are the results obtained from the quadrats that I used. Before conducting a thorough examination from the microplastics in the soil, I initially quantified the visible mesoplastics within each quadrant. The percentage of mesoplastics was determined based on the relative size of plastic covered area within the quadrant. For instance, if a quarter of the quadrant exhibited plastic, it was considered 25%. I was taken aback by the results I found during the quadrant data collection. They turned out to be quite different from what I had expected. The results show that Lora had more visibility of mesoplastics compared to the other areas. Now, let's take a look at the findings regarding the microplastic percentage that I obtained from the soil samples. After conducting a thorough analysis of the collected samples, it was determined that if any of the samples contained microplastics, it would be considered 5% of the total. The microplastic presence in Delap is at a level of 30%. For Wojja, it is 40%, Wojja, 20%, and as for Lora, 15%. The reason for the higher levels of microplastic in urban areas is primarily due to the urban environment itself. Urban areas tend to have higher population density, increased industrial activity, and greater human consumption, all of which contribute to plastic waste and potential microplastic pollution.